12 years. For 12 years. I never missed a single Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Not once. Not after the grueling 70-hour work weeks at my investment firm in Manhattan. Not after the sleepless nights during earnings season, when the numbers swam before my eyes. Even that winter. When the flu knocked me down so hard, I could barely stand. I still got behind the wheel and drove. Mom Lisa always said with pride that I was their reliable support. A daughter who remembers all the birthdays. Always bring dessert, and, most importantly, always shows up. That evening, as usual, I drove 45 minutes from my Upper West Side apartment to Westchester County, where their old but cozy colonial house stood. On the passenger seat, a lasagna pan was cooling, which I had made myself. Exactly the same as Dad Robert liked, with a double portion of cheese without the ricotta, which he could not stand. The smell of garlic and basil seemed to permeate the car's interior. It was the smell of home to me. The smell of stability and family warmth. When I pulled up, the porch light was already on. Its pale yellow circle against the gathering twilight promised comfort and peace. I parked at the curb, leaving a spot right at the entrance for Greg's BMW. My older brother always got the best spot. That's how it was since childhood. With the warm lasagna in my hands, I climbed the painfully familiar steps. Left. Right. Paused on the third, because it always creaked. I was already reaching for the door handle when I suddenly heard my name. Faith won't be a problem. It was my father's even. Confident voice. She never says no to her family. I froze. My hand remained hanging in the air. Voices were coming from the kitchen, bouncing off the granite countertops. Mom's voice sounded tense. Well, 275美元. Ling ling ling. Robert, that's crazy. Greg? How did you manage it? It doesn't matter how. Greg cut her off abruptly. The important thing is that something needs to be done about this before the IRS audit goes too far. You promised to help. And again, my father. Calmly and sensibly. We will help. Faith has a promotion. Remember. Senior analyst at that big firm of hers. She now earns no less than $132,000 a year. The dish in my hands did not tremble. But something inside me broke. I stood absolutely still, afraid that any movement would only make things worse. The cool screen door touched my hand, and the lasagna in my hands slowly but surely lost its warmth. And the conversation inside continued, as if I didn't exist. She said something about bonuses, added Greg. So, most likely. Even more. Mom said. She works so much. Always worked. There was a pause. Then Lisa's voice became quieter, as if she was convincing herself. We'll say it's for the roof. The house has been leaking for a long time. We can start with that. 14美元. Ling ling ling. Maybe. And then later I'll say for treatment that I need some procedures. Greg didn't even let her finish. She'll give it. She always gives it. Remember that business loan $16. Wu Bei. No questions asked. And she never asked for it back. She gave us her signing bonus. The father added proudly. 30美元. 000 just like that. Greg laughed a cold, unpleasant laugh. Who does that anyway? She still believes that we are a real family. It's even sad. Lisa didn't laugh. Her voice sounded fragile. Don't talk about your sister like that. Mom. She's naive. Greg snapped. She thinks that if she drags that damn lasagna here, it means something. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. In that moment, I clearly saw myself from the outside, standing on that porch over and over again, with my arms full and my heart open, never suspecting that I was just being slowly emptied. My father's voice became calm again, almost fatherly, and this calm sent a chill down my spine. We'll just plan out the requests. Lisa, just cry when you talk to her. It always works. Faith won't stand your tears. I don't like lying to her. Mom objected quietly. It's not a lie. Greg snapped. It's family. Her money is family money. She has no husband. No children. What does she spend them on? On this apartment of hers? The apartment into which I invested everything I had. My only place with a view of Central Park and a door that locked with 3 deadbolts. The only place I called mine. Everything will be fine with her. Robert summed it up. As if he had struck the judge's gavel. She always gets it done. That's what she's for. Are you sure there's no other way? There was a last faint hope in his mother's voice. Greg's voice became low and menacing. Unless you want me to go to federal prison for tax evasion and securities fraud. No. This is the only way. My lawyer says if I pay it all before they dig deeper, they'll change the case to civil. Fraud. Tax evasion. Securities fraud. My brother, who they bragged about to relatives, co-workers, random acquaintances at Whole Foods. He wasn't just in trouble. He was a criminal, and they were going to make me pay for it. I backed away from the door slowly, trying not to creak the damn step. My palms were sweaty, and the dish almost slipped from my hands. Not a sound. Not a trace. And I couldn't let them know that I heard everything. Amazingly, I made it to the car without falling apart. My legs felt like cotton wool. Like I was floating above the ground. The lasagna lay in my lap, like an inappropriate, cruel joke. I didn't leave right away. Just sat with the engine off, listening to the hum of cicadas and the occasional noise of passing cars. My iPhone vibrated in the cup holder. A text from Lisa. Honey. Where are you? Dinner's ready. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I typed. Sorry. Called into work. Urgent audit. Another time. 3 dots blinked back. And then her text came. Oh. Too bad. We had an important conversation. This couldn't wait. She was going to start about the roof. Just like they planned. Sorry. Mom. The boss says it's urgent. Love you. I didn't go home. Not yet. I was just driving through the city at night. City lights. 24-hour CVS stores. Places that didn't know me. I needed movement. Not a destination. By the time I finally pulled into the underground garage of my building on West 72nd Street, the lasagna was still a bit cold. I left her in the passenger seat and went upstairs empty-handed. In the apartment, I didn't turn on the light right away. I stood by the window, watching the night filter through Central Park's trees, and felt something crack inside. Not anger yet. Just tired. Cold clarity. I gave them $33,000 when I graduated from NYU, and then lived on ramen noodles and Starbucks coffee until I could save up again. I gave Greg $16,500 when his hedge fund went bust. I paid for their anniversary dinners at Peter Luger when they said they were short on money. And I never asked for a penny back. Because I thought that was what good daughters did. Good sister did. Real family did. But now I realized something I hadn't realized before. They never saw it as generosity. They saw it as submission. By the time I went to bed, a plan had already begun to form in my head. Quiet and sharp. I won't tell them what I know. Not yet. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I took action. I sat down at my desk and opened all my accounts, checking at Chase, savings at Bank of America, investment at Fidelity, even the old 401 Kelvins from my first job at Goldman Sachs. I transferred every penny into new banks my parents didn't know about, credit unions, online banks, institutions they'd never heard of. I called customer service, set up fraud alerts, and froze any shared access we had ever had. Then I changed all the passwords, set up 2-factor authentication through Google Authenticator, and changed the security questions. My phone was buzzing constantly. Mom. Dad. Greg. I didn't answer. Instead, I emailed my boss, Susan Martinez, and asked if she had a few minutes. The topic was simple, personal, urgent. Susan Martinez was a woman of about 50, sharp-tongued and smart. When I entered her corner office overlooking Wall Street, she didn't smile, just pointed to the chair. "I need advice," I said. "Not legal." "Not yet. Just personal. But it could affect my work." She nodded. "Speak." And I told her everything, the conversation I'd overheard, the money I'd been giving away for years, Greg's scam, their plan, and my plan to disappear financially. She listened to the end, her arms crossed over her chest, her face growing darker with every word I said. When I finished, she leaned forward. "First of all," she said, "you're handling this better than most. Second, you need a lawyer. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they might try to twist it. Third, you need records. Every dollar. Every request. Document everything." I opened the Excel spreadsheet I started making last night. 5 years of Venmo transfers. Zelle payments. Checks. Dates. Amounts. With notes in the margins. For Greg's urgent needs. For my mother's treatment. Susan whistled quietly. "There's almost $165. 000 here." I was silent. I couldn't speak. There was a lump in my throat. Then she looked at me. And something soft appeared in her voice. "And one more thing. We have a vacancy opening in our Seattle office. Same position. Higher salary. And, most importantly, a continent between you and this mess." "Seattle," I repeated, as if in a fog. "You won't be alone," she said. "We'll provide support. Arrange all the paperwork. The relocation package. Everything." I didn't answer. Not yet. But something inside me shifted again. That same day, Greg finally managed to get through to me. I don't know why I answered. She probably wanted to hear how he was going to get out of this. "Jesus Christ," he blurted out. "Where have you been at work?" I answered evenly. "At the same job that, in your opinion, prints money for me." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm busy." "What do you want?" "Greg, we need to talk. The whole family is having dinner tomorrow." "I can't. I have plans." "Plans more important than family?" I didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes. Plans where people don't collude behind their backs to steal $275. Ling ling ling. There was silence on the other end of the line. "I don't understand what you're talking about," Greg finally said. But there was no confidence in his voice anymore. "Tax evasion. Securities fraud. You were going to let me pay for all this," he laughed. Too loud. Too forced. "So you were eavesdropping." "I brought lasagna," I said. "Me. Remember the family dinner? What do you think I still stupidly believe, Faith?" "Listen. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You planned it all. You told them to let Mommy cry if she needed to. You called me naive. I'm in trouble." His voice broke. "You should have thought of that before you broke federal law. Are you seriously going to let me go to prison for money? Money you can afford?" I closed my eyes. I couldn't afford the $33. 000. I gave my parents. I couldn't afford the $16,500 I gave you. I couldn't afford any of it. But I gave because I thought that's what family did. Silence again. Heavy. Sticky. He didn't know what to say. "I'm begging you," he said finally. "Pay someone else." I hung up. Text from Greg. From Mom. From Dad immediately poured in via iMessage. I didn't read them. On Wednesday, the receptionist called up to my office. It was Lisa. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair was disheveled. Her eyes were red. She didn't wait to be escorted up, but simply rushed past security and found me by the elevators. "Faith. Please. Just talk to me." I was standing in the marble lobby of my firm, in a dark blue Armani suit with Louboutin heels, and my mother was sobbing in front of me like a child. "We can talk," I said. "Right here." She winced. Maybe we should find a more private place. Greg is in trouble. I know. Securities fraud. Tax evasion. He told me he made mistakes. But he is your brother. No. He is your son. You help him. We don't have that kind of money. You know. Then maybe he shouldn't have committed federal offenses. Her voice wavered. How can you be so cold? You don't seem like yourself. You're right. The old me would have written a check by now. The old me thought love meant sacrifice. The old me believed you when you said family helps family. She looked at me. Confused. What do you mean? I mean the old faith died on your porch last Sunday. That stopped her. Isn't that what you mean? I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You said I couldn't refuse. You said I didn't understand the real world. You said I turned to jelly when you cried. And now there were real tears streaming down her cheeks. Not for show. Real fear. We were disparity. No. You were greedy. They are different. She extended her hand toward me. I took a step back. I left her there in the lobby, beneath the gold letters of my firm's name. I didn't turn around. Thursday passed in silence. No calls. No messages. No surprise visits. For a moment, I even thought that maybe it was all over. Maybe they finally understood. Friday afternoon. As the work week wound down and the office became quiet and peaceful, for the first time in days, I felt something like peace. A day of silence. Thursday gave me a glimmer of hope that they might have backed off. I was almost ready to pack up my desk, looking forward to a quiet weekend of planning my new life. When the intercom rang, the receptionist's voice was as even as ever. But I caught a note of confusion in it. Faith. There's a process server down here. He says he has documents for you. The world froze for a moment. The words process server struck like an electric shock. And the fragile hope shattered. I knew who it was from. I felt it. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice even. Sent him up. The man who entered my office was a faceless cog in the machine. He did not look me in the eye. His movements were practiced and quick. He handed me a standard manila envelope. I signed for it on his iPad. And he left silently, leaving me alone with this harbinger of the storm. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened it. Inside, printed in dry, official language. They were words that my brain refused to comprehend. Plaintiff Lisa Marie Johnson. Robert James Johnson. Defendant Faith Rebecca Johnson. Then came the shocking claim. They alleged that all the money I had given them over the years had not been gifts but loans. That we had had an oral agreement to repay it. And that now, having suddenly broken off contact, I was not only demanding early repayment, but had also caused them moral damage and financial instability. It was so monstrous, so beyond absurd, that I couldn't hold back. A laugh burst from my chest. Not amused, but empty. Bitter. Like a cough. It echoed through the quiet office. They didn't just want money. They wanted to destroy me. Punish me for disobedience. Grind me into dust. Without thinking, I called Catherine Cohen, the attorney Susan had recommended. I quickly scanned and emailed her the documents. She called back within minutes. So, I looked through everything. Her voice was calm and businesslike. And this professionalism was like a breath of fresh air. Faith. They have absolutely no chance. This is legal garbage. No contracts. No receipts. Not even witnesses who could confirm the existence of debt obligations. This is a classic case of psychological pressure. An attempt to intimidate. Can we file a counterclaim? I asked. While the possible options flashed through my head for defamation. For emotional distress. Absolutely. She confirmed. We can demand compensation for all legal costs. Punitive dommage. We can file a malicious prosecution suit. I listened to her and understood that I did not want this. To get involved in a lawsuit with them would mean allowing them to continue to be in my life. Even as opponents. This would mean new months of stress. Hatred and dirt. No. I said firmly. I don't need their money. I just want them to disappear." After a short pause, Catherine's voice sounded understanding. "I understand you. We will prepare a response that will once and for all discourage them from continuing." I put the legal papers in the farthest drawer of my desk and locked it. That weekend, I started packing, and it was like performing soul surgery. Every item evoked a memory. There was the Williams-Sonoma cookbook, a gift from my mother, with her neat notes in the margins: "Add more oregano. Cook on medium heat." Those notes had once warmed my soul, now they burned. There was a stack of photographs. Christmas. Birthdays. I am happy. Smiling in all of them, and almost in all of them behind the camera. The eternal chronicler of family happiness. Which, as it turned out, was fake. I looked at these faces for a long time. My father's smiling face. My mother's tender look. Greg's smug grin. I wrapped them in bubble wrap and left them on the floor. I didn't throw them away in anger. I just left them behind. Like you leave the clothes of a person who's gone. On Sunday morning, when I was deep in boxes and memories, my iPhone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and I answered automatically. "Are you really going to let me go to prison?" Greg's voice was muffled. "I'm not letting you do anything. Greg, you're going to prison because you're a criminal." I could lose everything. There were tears in his voice. "And me." I thought, "Haven't I lost everything out loud?" I said. "I've already lost everything: my family, my trust, my faith." I was afraid. He whispered. I didn't know what else to do. What a pathetic, predictable excuse. "You planned it all. You laughed. You taught them how to lie to me. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't think about me at all." I snapped. It was the purest, bitter truth. There was no room for me as a person in his plan. Only as a function. He tried again. "Faith? Please. I've already told you. Forgive someone else. I've had enough." I ended the call and blocked the number. It was the last time. On Monday, I stood in the middle of my half-empty apartment. The walls echoed with every sound. I looked at what I had built and felt that it was no longer my home. It was a monument to a life that no longer existed. I didn't cry. I simply grabbed my last bag, zipped it up, and left it by the front door, along with instructions for the North American Van Line's movers. Seattle. 3-bedroom condo, with a view of Elliott Bay. That night I slept deeply and peacefully. For the first time in many years, I no longer had to pretend. I found it by chance. At the very last moment, when I was about to close the door of the empty apartment, passing the kitchen. For some reason I glanced at the open cabinet under the sink. There, in the farthest, darkest corner, behind the forgotten method cleaning supplies. There it was. That lasagna dish. I took it out, and its weight felt both familiar and foreign. I ran my fingers over the cool Pyrex rim, over the manufacturer's logo on the bottom. I remembered buying it years ago at Macy's. Choosing the best, the most reliable one. I remembered the first time I baked that lasagna for my father in it, worried about how he would like it. This object was not just a kitchen tool. It was an artifact, a silent witness to my entire past life, full of hopes, self-deception, and unrequited love. It was like a vessel for all the dinners I had cooked, all the attempts to earn love, all the moments when they smiled at me while slowly emptying my soul. I stood in the hollow silence of the empty kitchen, where my every breath echoed, and felt nothing but cold clarity. No anger, no sadness. I simply walked up to the trash can filled with the last scraps of my New York life and, without hesitation, dropped the dish in. The dull thud of glass hitting cardboard was the only sound. It was the sound of a period, placed at the end of a very long sentence. At JFK Airport, amid the bustle of crowds and the announcements of flights to different ends of the world, he sat at my gate. Around me were people saying goodbye, greeting arrivals, families, couples in love, a whole world of other people's stories. And at that moment, I felt completely free of my own. That's when my iPhone vibrated. The last message from an unfamiliar number. But one I still recognized. It was Lisa. I'm sorry. Not for the help we needed, but for the way we planned to get it. You deserved better. I hope you can forgive us one day. I read the words over and over, analyzing them with the cold precision of an analyst. You deserved better. The phrase still held the justification. The shifting of blame to circumstances rather than full acceptance of responsibility. They regretted the method, not the substance. Slowly considering each word, I typed out a reply. I hope one day you can earn forgiveness. Earn. That was the key word. Forgiveness isn't something you give. It's something that comes through actions. I sent the message. Turned off my phone and put it in my carry-on. The Alaska Airlines flight to Seattle was waiting. 6 months later. One foggy morning, when I was sitting in my new office with a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, an email arrived from Catherine. Dry facts on the computer screen seemed like news from another planet. Greg was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for tax evasion and securities fraud. His parents sold their house in Westchester to cover some of his debts and the enormous legal costs. They were likely to spend the rest of their lives in his aunt's modest apartment in Queens. I finished reading the email, drank my Starbucks coffee, and looked at the ferries crossing the bay. I felt nothing, no satisfaction from justice. Not gloating. Not even an echo of past pain. It was like reading a historical account of people who had once lived but were long dead. Their fate no longer had any bearing on me. My life in Seattle was real. I breathed the fresh Pacific air. Went hiking in the Olympic Mountains. Saw incredible sunsets over Puget Sound. I made friends not by obligation, but by choice. We could talk for hours about books, about travel, about the future. And in these relationships, there were no hidden debts and expectations. They valued me for who I am, and not for what I can give them. Sometimes, on quiet Sunday mornings, I still made lasagna. The aroma of basil and garlic filled my bright kitchen. But now it was a ritual of self-love. I made it for myself, savoring every bite. Because I deserved it. I did it not because I missed them, but because I remembered. I remembered that naive girl with an open heart who believed that if you gave enough, you would be loved in return. I no longer despised her or pitied her. I simply accepted her as part of my past. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew that love without respect was debt in a pretty wrapper. A woman who understood that leaving was not an act of weakness, but an act of great strength. It meant saving yourself and remembering who you really were. If you've ever stood at the door with faith in your heart, only to hear something that shattered your world, you're not alone. And you don't have to apologize to anyone for choosing yourself. Sometimes the only person who can save you is yourself. Story 2. On Friday evening, I returned home from work feeling like a squeezed lemon. My legs were buzzing. My head was buzzing from endless tasks and conversations with colleagues. All I dreamed of was taking off my shoes, making hot tea, and sinking into the sofa. The thought was spinning in my head that I would finally spend Saturday in peace and quiet. Without fuss. Without meetings. Just home alone. When I entered the entrance, everything was as usual. The smell of old paint. The creaking of the steps. The semi-darkness. But something strange was waiting for me right at the door. A woman was standing at the threshold with 2 huge bags and a suitcase on wheels. I didn't even immediately understand who it was. Her gaze darted from her face to her things, and it pierced me. It was my mother-in-law. She stood there with such an air as if she had lived here all her life. And I just lingered somewhere on my face. No shadow. Awkwardness. On the contrary, pride and a sense of my own rightness. Well? My daughter. I arrived, she said cheerfully. As if these words should please me. I didn't even immediately understand what was happening. I just opened my mouth and silently stared at her. How we've arrived, I whispered, without even moving. But Vitalik didn't say. She was surprised. I'll stay with you for a while. I'm renovating my house. There's dust. There's a smell. And it's hard to organize everything on my own. He said, "You won't mind. I've only brought the most necessary things. The rest will be delivered later." I had to grab the door frame. Dozens of thoughts flashed through my head at once. All anxious, angry, and incomprehensible. What renovation? What do you have? This is my apartment. Bought with my money before marriage. My husband and I agreed that it was just the two of us. No temporary residence of relatives. Especially without my consent. I took out my phone and dialed Vitalik. He didn't pick up right away. And when he did, he talked as if about the weather. "Yes. I wanted to tell you. But I forgot. Mom will stay with us for a while. You don't mind." "To do you?" I fell silent for a few seconds. Every word he said hit my nerves like a hammer. "You forgot to tell me that your mother will be living in my house." "Are you serious?" I asked hoarsely. "What's wrong with that?" He was surprised. "You're not a stranger to her. This is temporary. Just for a couple of weeks. It's hard for her to be alone. Be human." I exhaled. It was like a slap in the face. Without asking, without agreeing. They just presented me with a fait accompli. As if I didn't exist. As if my opinion was unimportant. I slowly turned to my mother-in-law. She was smiling and had already started rolling her suitcase across the threshold. "Excuse me. But have you got the wrong address?" I said calmly. Stood in front of the entrance and gently but confidently blocked the way. What she was taken aback. "How dare you? I didn't sign anything. I didn't allow anyone to live here. Not today. Not tomorrow. This is my home. If my husband thinks such decisions are possible, let him find another place to live for the guests." I didn't shout. I just spoke evenly. Calmly. There was silence behind the door. She stood there. Shocked. Then muttered something offended, like a daughter-in-law with character, and pulled the suitcase back. I closed the door without listening to the end. My hands were shaking. I sank down on the sofa and stared at the ceiling. Everything was boiling inside. Betrayal. That's what I felt. It wasn't my mother-in-law that was the main problem, but my husband, who stepped over me so easily, without even consulting. I just did what was convenient for him. I thought our marriage was based on trust, but it turned out to be based on his convenience. The phone vibrated again. A message from Vitalik. "How could you do this to Mom? She's in shock. She's waiting for me at the cafe. I didn't expect this from you." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to apologize for standing up for my space. This was my home. And now it was my choice. The next morning, when I woke up, the tension in the air was almost tangible. There was silence in my head. He hadn't called. And I wasn't going to make the first move. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee in my hands and watched the bright rays of the morning sun break through the curtains. Everything looked like nothing had happened. But that was an illusion. Everything was seething inside. I needed to make a decision. And most importantly, to do something. As I approached the door, dozens of messages from Vitaly appeared on my phone screen again. "Are you serious? I can't tell her that she's not needed here." And with each new message, anger grew in my heart. I couldn't believe that my husband was so calmly confronting me with the fact and not caring about my feelings. I hadn't answered yet. And Vitalik called. I looked at the screen. Vitalik. Sighing. I picked up the phone. "Why did you do that? You could have at least warned me." I began immediately, without waiting for a greeting. "You don't mind her living with us, do you? You said you didn't care." He tried to justify himself. "How can you even say that I couldn't stand it? You can't decide for both of us. You and I should discuss these things." "What did you do? You just brought her here without warning. That's called respect. You think I should just go along with it?" That moment when I felt like the conversation was pointless because he wasn't trying to understand. He was just making excuses. Everything felt empty and meaningless. For a second, I even wanted to break this connection and leave. But I held back. I felt that if I left the room now, when I returned, it would only be worse. I don't understand why you react this way. Vitaly continued. You knew that Mom was with us. She doesn't want to live with us at all. She simply has nowhere to go until she renovates her house. I thought you wouldn't mind. I pressed my lips together. And for a moment, I was so scared. He was talking as if I had done something wrong. As if it was my fault. You don't know what it's like to live with someone you didn't choose, I said, trying not to raise my voice. And you don't have the right to just decide that someone will live with us. Even if it's your mother. This is my home. And if you want things to stay the same, you need to learn to talk to me and not make decisions on the sly. The silence on the other side lasted for a few seconds, and I waited for an answer. But there was none. Only a whisper in the receiver. Are you ignoring me? I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know you would take it that way. You see, she is my mother. You know how she worries. I put the phone down and leaned back in the chair. My head was bursting with internal tension. And outside the window, the day continued its run. It seemed like morning. But I felt like I was underground. I didn't understand how to continue. I was sure that he would understand that I was wrong. That I would somehow explain it to him. But now, sitting in this chair, it seemed to me that I had lost everything. And if this was the moment when I had to make a choice, then I made it. A few hours later, Vitalik showed up. He walked into the apartment with his head down. I'm not looking at me. As if he could hide from me behind his thoughts. I sat on the couch, not moving, and silently waited for him to speak. I see him with eyes that do not look into mine. He sat down on a chair, began to fidget with his jacket. Nervously. And you don't want to talk. He finally broke the silence. What is there to discuss? You decided for both of us. And now you want to talk. What if I hadn't agreed? I answered, not hiding my irritation. He jumped up and started pacing the room. For a moment, it seemed like he was losing his cool. Too. I could see he was struggling with himself. But at that moment it didn't matter to me. He had to understand. I don't understand why you're reacting like this. Mom, it's hard for her right now. She doesn't want to be here. But she has nowhere else to be. And I can't leave her in this situation. You have to understand. I understand one thing. You chose her. Not me. I am not important to you. Vitalik. You didn't tell me she was coming. Didn't even discuss it with you. You hurt me. You don't understand it. I could barely hold back my tears. I wasn't ready for such experiences. But they took their toll. Vitalik also felt hard. He stopped and exhaled. We both fell silent. Every word was hard. We stood. I just stood opposite each other, not knowing how to get everything back. 2 days passed. He didn't show up. No call. No message. Only rare notifications from his mother-in-law, full of reproaches and caustic remarks. Your mother spoiled you. That's what you are like. You haven't even given birth yet. But you already feel like a mistress. My son is suffering because of you. I didn't answer. I was tired of explaining to people who weren't even trying to listen. Everything that happened only increased my loneliness, and the understanding of how fragile our union was. On the evening of the 3rd day, I was returning from work. It was quiet. The stairwell smelled of fried potatoes and fresh bread. An ordinary evening in an apartment building. But at my door, as I feared, stood my mother-in-law again, with the same suitcases in the same pose. Only this time her face expressed not confidence, but irritation. I do not intend to hang around other people's corners anymore, she declared, as soon as I got up. My heart is not made of iron. Vitalik said you've cooled down. I decided it would be okay if I just came in. Lived quietly. And didn't bother you. I didn't open the door. I just stood there without turning the key. Why don't you rent an apartment? Why didn't you stay with your friend? I asked. Tired. Why do you think I have to let you in? I'm his mother. She answered defiantly. And who are you? The girl who was lucky enough to marry my son. You have a big mouth, but no respect. Do you think that if the apartment is registered in your name, then you cannot let people in? Yes. I think so, I answered, and my hands were no longer shaking. Because this is not about the apartment. This is about boundaries. You barged into my life without knocking, and still want me to obediently retreat. You and Vitalik both didn't ask. You both decided. And I'm not furniture. She sighed heavily and suddenly said reservedly, as if giving in. Okay. I won't insist. I'll go back. But know that you destroyed the family. Did you stand between your son and mother? And one day he will understand it. I opened the door and walked in without turning around. Behind me, I heard her dragging the suitcase down the steps. It was a little bitter, but also calm. I did what I had to do. Later, closer to midnight, Vitalik returned. I heard the key turn quietly. How he entered and put something by the threshold. He didn't even go to the kitchen. He just sat down on the ottoman in the hallway. I left the room. You didn't let her in again, he said. Not looking at me. And you didn't ask again, I answered. He looked up at me. There was something else in his eyes, fatigue. An admission of guilt. Or just emptiness. You know? I didn't think it was that complicated. You were always so independent. So strong. I thought you could handle everything. And you suddenly set limits, because I'm human. I said quietly. Because I love myself. And if I don't set boundaries now, you'll walk all over me again and again. Today, his mother. Tomorrow, someone else. Where will I be then? He stood up slowly. As if it was difficult for him. Took a step closer to me. Then a second. I didn't retreat. I just looked. I don't want to lose you. He whispered. I'm just used to making my own decisions. I always thought you'd forgive me. What do you say, okay? And you said. No. And it's scary. I sat on the couch. He and Ian were next to me. We sat in silence. There were no more fights. No more accusations. Only understanding. We both knew that you had changed. Now everything would be different, or not at all. If you want us to stay together, I said, you have to understand one simple thing. I am not against your mother. I am against being excluded from decisions. I want to be your equal. Not an appendage. He nodded slowly. Heavily. But there was something important in that nod. Perhaps for the first time in a long time. He really heard me. The morning was gray and dull. Vitalik and I did not argue. But we did not talk either. A thick silence hung in the house. Like dust that no one had cleaned for weeks. He got up before me. Quietly got ready. Poured himself some coffee, and left without saying a word. I heard the lock click, and only then did I open my eyes. I was alone. And this feeling was strange. Prickly. As if you were living in an apartment where everything was the same. But not yours anymore. I walked barefoot on the cold floor, and tried to feel where I had made a mistake. Or maybe. On the contrary. I finally did something right. The day passed in thought. I kept turning the same phrases over and over in my head. This is my apartment. He had no right. But he is still my husband. What tormented me most was not that my mother-in-law tried to stay, but that he did not even think that this could be unpleasant for me. Everything looked like my opinion. A formality. And this after a year of marriage. He was used to me adapting. Used to me being understanding. Convenient. Reliable. But now I showed that I have a limit. And he did not expect it. In the evening, he showed up again. This time, he did not bring empty-handed a bag of groceries. His favorite pie from the bakery near the metro. As if an apology. He put everything in the kitchen and washed his hands for a long time. I stood in the doorway. Watching. Neither he nor I started the conversation first. Then I took a step forward. Are you going to pretend that everything is fine again, I asked. Not rudely. But directly. He wiped his hands on a towel and looked at me. For a long time. As if choosing the right words. No. I came because I don't want us to live like neighbors. I realized that I did the wrong thing. Yes. Dent's mom is sacred. But you are my family too. And I had no right to do this. I nodded silently. Not because I forgave. Because it was important to hear exactly that. You know, he continued. I thought you were just offended. That you would calm down later. But when Mom said you wouldn't let her, I got angry. And then I sat down and thought, you're right. We didn't discuss it. I didn't give you a choice. I just decided, and that hurt me. Not only that, I added quietly, you didn't protect me. You let her right. Kiv, you let me blame it all. You didn't stop me. And you didn't even ask how I felt. You were on her side. I was confused. He admitted. Mama Davila. You were silent. I thought that if I stayed neutral, everything would resolve itself. And you expected me to stand by your side. Tears came to my eyes. But I held them back. He really understood. He didn't brush it off. It didn't counterattack. He heard not as a husband, not as a son, but as a man who finally saw the pain he had caused. I don't mind your mother, Vitaly, I said, but I do mind the intrusions. I don't mind helping if you just talk to me and explain. I'm not a monster, but you decided for me and then made me feel guilty. I had to defend myself. He approached cautiously, as if he was afraid I'd flinch. But I stayed put. He took my hands. I want us to learn to be honest. I won't decide alone anymore. If Mom ever comes again, we'll decide together. I promised her that she'll stay with her aunt in the village until she sorts out the repairs. And if she needs help, I'll go myself. Just tell me if you're having trouble. Don't keep it to yourself. Those words lifted the weight off me. Not completely, but enough to take a deep breath. We weren't the same yet. And maybe we never would be. But the fact that he was starting to change gave me hope. I'm tired of being strong and alone. I whispered. I want to be with someone who is with me. Not against me. Then be with me. He answered. Only for real. Where we both talk. Listen and respect. We hugged silently. Without shouting. Without being killed. Just like two people tired of fighting, but determined not to run away. And in that silence there was much more love than in any explanations. Story. 3 inches the evening. I returned home in a good mood. The day at work was productive. The management praised me. But I still caught myself replaying moments of our wedding in my head. The laughing faces of friends. The music. The warm words of my parents. It seemed that Artem and I did everything perfectly. Despite the fact that it was not easy to organize everything on our own. But as soon as I opened the door of the apartment, the coziness and warmth of the moment evaporated. My mother-in-law was sitting at the kitchen table. She was wearing her strict suit, with her hair perfectly done and, as usual, was holding a cup of tea, as if it were a glass of expensive wine. Her gaze immediately fixed on me. And I realized that the conversation would be unpleasant. So, kids. When are you going to give it to me? She said, with a barely noticeable grin. Not looking at her son, but straight at me. I froze at the threshold, not understanding what they were talking about. What should I give? I asked, taking off my coat and glancing at Artyom. It seemed he himself didn't know what to say. Money. Of course. With slight irritation in her voice. My mother-in-law answered for the wedding. Something clicked in my head. I was absolutely sure she hadn't invested a penny in our celebration. We covered all the expenses for the banquet. The hall rental. The photographer. The music. The decorations ourselves. Plus my parents helped. And then she talks about some debt. Mom. Artem began cautiously. But his mother-in-law interrupted him. I told you back then that it was a debt. A debt, I asked again, feeling my indignation rising. Can you clarify what exactly was a debt? If you didn't pay anything. She straightened up, as if she had been waiting for this question. How so nothing? And my moral support, and the advice I gave you on choosing the menu, and the fact that I went with you to look at the banquet hall. Do you think all this was free? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. But I held back. Her tone was too serious. Sorry, but moral support is not paid. We appreciate that you were there, but that is no reason to send us a bill. She raised her eyebrows. So that's how it is. So, my nerves, the time spent caring, are worth nothing. Mom, Artem said tiredly. We are grateful for your participation. But grateful. She interrupted. Gratitude is good. But it would be better if you were honest and admitted that you are obliged. He felt my patience running out. She sat in front of us like an accountant, ready to present a balance for invisible services. I tried to speak as calmly as possible. We don't owe anyone anything. Neither you, nor other relatives. It was our wedding. And we paid for everything ourselves. Well? Of course. She drawled with a venomous smile. If that's what you decided, then I'll remember. A very long time to remember. Artyom sighed heavily and turned away. Clearly not wanting to continue. I realized that the conversation had only just begun. There was a determination in her eyes. She was going to squeeze some kind of compensation out of us. And it was scary. Not because we couldn't afford it, but because the very fact of such demands was humiliating. That evening, we had a dinner in silence. I felt everything boiling inside. And dozens of caustic answers were spinning in my head, which I never dared to voice. My mother-in-law acted as if her position was absolutely justified. She savored her tea, looking at us from under her brow, as if she expected us to give in and agree to her terms. When she left, I exhaled. But instead of relief, I felt anxiety. This conversation was not a one-time thing. This was only the first round. I knew she wouldn't leave me alone until she got her way. But my resolve was already growing stronger. We wouldn't cave in this time. The next day, I decided to go home early. I managed to finish my work tasks faster. I hoped to spend a quiet evening with Artyom. But as soon as I opened the door, I realized there would be no peace. My mother-in-law's boots were standing in the hallway, and her voice was coming from the kitchen. She was speaking loudly and confidently, as if she were conducting business negotiations. I walked in and saw her at the kitchen table. Some checks, a notebook in a squared pattern, and a pen were spread out in front of her. She was carefully writing something down. "Oh, you're just in time," she said, without even saying hello. "Look." I made a list of expenses, what expenses I took off my coat and sat down opposite her. Although I already guessed where this was all heading. Your wedding. Of course. She said this as if it were something obvious. For example, gasoline. Remember, I went with you to choose a dress. That was 3 trips to different boutiques. Gasoline is expensive these days. He blinked, trying to comprehend what I had heard. Do you seriously think that this is help in financing the wedding? Of course. She answered without blinking an eye. And that's not all. Calls to the Legislative Assembly. Negotiations with the host. These are also my resources. I was wasting my time. And time is money. I felt irritation boiling inside. She sat before me with the air of a stern auditor summing up the annual report. Mom, I said as calmly as I could. Let's separate the concepts. The money is a real investment. And we perceived your advice and trips as an expression of concern, not as a bill for services. She immediately frowned. That's exactly it. You perceived. And I spent energy. It's not the same thing. I pressed my lips together to keep from answering harshly. And what do you have there in the end? Only 8,000 so far. She glanced sideways at the notebook. But I haven't calculated everything yet. I felt both funny and sad at the same time. My parents were at the wedding. They paid half the expenses, gave us money, and never mentioned that we owed them. And here is a person who hasn't contributed a penny. Now, trying to monetize even what once seemed like simple family help. Mom. I took a deep breath. We don't owe you anything. Not for trips. Not for advice. Not for calls. This was our holiday. And we were counting on ourselves. She looked at me with a long look, in which discontent and stubbornness were read. So that's it. Huh. That means my efforts were in vain. You tried for your son and perhaps for yourself. But we didn't ask you to do this. I said a little harsher than I had planned. At that moment, Artyom entered the kitchen. He sensed the tension in the air and, frowning, asked, again, talking about debt, not debt. Oh, justice. His mother corrected him. I think my efforts should be appreciated. Artyom sank into a chair and looked at her wearily. Mom, we didn't hire you to plan the wedding. You took the initiative yourself. We're grateful, but we're not going to pay for it. She pressed her lips together, raised her eyebrows and said with cold resentment, well, I see. I'll write it down for myself. In this family, help is free, and no one is obliged to appreciate it. I noticed Artyom roll his eyes, but said nothing. My mother-in-law sat for a while, pretending to continue counting, and then carefully put the receipts and notebook in her bag. Before leaving, she gave me a look full of some kind of quiet threat and said, don't worry. I'll remember everything. When the door closed behind her, I felt that I was shaking not from fear, but from anger and helplessness. It seemed to me that her behavior was not just strange, but a deliberate attempt to make us dependent. If we did not stop now, this debt would grow with each of her visits. Artyom hugged me and quietly said, forgive me. I know that this is all ridiculous, but that's how she is. I nodded. Although I understood that if we let her dictate the terms, our life would turn into an endless list of services that had to be paid for, and I already knew that the next time we met, I would have to speak much more harshly. A couple of days later, my mother-in-law showed up at the door again. This time, she didn't come empty-handed. She had large bags in both hands. So at first I thought she wanted to mend the relationship. Here, I brought you some food, she said, barely crossing the threshold and heading straight to the kitchen, without even waiting for an invitation. I followed. She carefully began laying out cutlets, jars of pickled cucumbers, a container of salad, and then turned around and added, just keep in mind, this isn't free either. He blinked, trying to figure out if she was joking or serious. Excuse me, are you saying that we have to pay for these cutlets? What did you think? Her tone was surprised, as if I had asked a stupid question. Food is expensive now. I don't have to feed you. But we didn't ask you. I tried to speak evenly, but inside I was already boiling. We have food. I know there is, she answered calmly, but I still decided to help. And help, as you understand, also has a price. At that moment, Artyom, who had heard the last words, entered the kitchen. He froze for a second, and then frowned. Mom, this is too much. No one ordered anything from you. I'm not saying that you have to give it to me now, she said resentfully. You can later. Just keep in mind that I am also investing in your life. We can handle it ourselves, Artyom said firmly. We don't need you to bring us anything if you're going to demand money for it later. The mother-in-law sighed, as if she was dealing with ungrateful children who don't appreciate the golden mountains that are given to them. You are the ungrateful ones. I do all this for you, and you only push me away. I realized that there was no point in arguing. She would not hear. For her, any little thing, any gesture, is not a sign of care, but an investment that should return with interest. While Artyom was helping her put the bags back, I remembered our first meeting after the engagement. Then she brought a box of chocolates and said, "This is for you for the future, so that you remember that I am also involved." Then I decided it was a joke. Now I understand. It was the first warning sign. She left half an hour later, taking most of the food back, but leaving us a jar of pickles, so that at least you would have something from me, she said to him as she left. When the door slammed behind her, I exhaled and sank into a chair. This is already abnormal, I said, looking at Artyom. I'm shocked myself. He tiredly ran his hand over his face. But she? Well, She always had a character. It's not a character. Artyom. It's manipulation. Cutlets today. Tomorrow she'll bring a towel and say that we owe for it. He paused, then nodded. I know. But how can I stop her? Tell her straight out that we won't accept anything. If she considers it a debt? I answered. And keep my word. That evening we decided that we really needed to set boundaries. Artyom dialed her number and said calmly on speakerphone, Mom, I appreciate your help. But if you think that we should pay for everything you do, then it's better not to do it at all. We can handle it ourselves. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then her voice sounded cold. Well, I get it. So you refuse any support from me? Support no, said Artyom. But paid support. Yes. Well, then live as you wish, she said sharply, and hung up. We exchanged glances. On the one hand, it was unpleasant that everything ended in a quarrel. On the other, for the first time I felt that we had taken the right step. But I was wrong to think that this would be the end of it. Deep down, I already knew that such a person would not just go away. She would definitely find a way to return to this topic, only in a different form. And even then, I understood that the next conversation would be much tougher. A week of silence passed. I even began to think that perhaps my mother-in-law had resigned herself to it. But on Friday evening, when Artyom and I were planning to have a cozy evening with a movie and pizza, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw her. She was standing there in a coat, with a neat hairdo and a serious expression. She was holding a thick envelope in her hands. We need to talk, she said, walking into the apartment as if it was her home. Artyom and I exchanged glances and followed her into the kitchen. She sat down at the table, put the envelope in front of her, and slowly pushed it towards her son. Here is a list. The amount is small. Only 30. Ling ling ling. This is for all my services and help with the wedding. I felt my insides tighten. Artyom opened the envelope, took out several sheets of paper, written in neat handwriting, and began to read aloud. Trips to the store, 4. 500 rubles. Calls and negotiations, 2. Ling ling ling. Moral support, 10. Ling ling ling. Advice on choosing a menu, 5. Ling ling ling. Accompaniment to a dress fitting, 3. Wubei. Gasoline, 5. Ling ling ling. I couldn't stand it and interrupted. Mom, let's clarify. Do you really want us to pay for moral support and advice? Why not? She was genuinely surprised. This is also work. But this is our common holiday, and not contract work. I said. Don't hold back your irritation anymore. Your holiday. But my energy and time, she answered calmly. I think this is fair. Artyom put the list on the table and looked at his mother seriously. Mom! These are all far-fetched expenses. There is nothing here that we asked for or ordered. We will not pay for it. Her eyes flashed. So you do not appreciate what I did. So I was just in your way. We appreciate Tar. I intervened. But appreciating and paying are two different things. She was silent for a few seconds, and then said quietly, but menacingly, Good. Then you do not have to expect anything more from me. No advice. No help. No gifts. It's your choice, I said firmly. But it's also our choice not to pay for something we didn't ask for. A heavy silence hung in the room. Artyom stood up and handed his mother his coat. Mom, let's close this topic. She took the envelope and stood up, but turned around at the threshold. Will you regret treating me like this? Tver slammed shut. And I felt a wave of relief pass through my body. We finally put an end to it. But there was also a feeling of sadness. After all, this is my husband's mother. Artyom sat down next to me and hugged me. You were right. If we had given in now, she would have considered us debtors for the rest of her life. I nodded. Inside, there was a clear feeling that we had done the right thing. Sometimes you have to set boundaries firmly, even if it hurts. Because if you don't, you will be used endlessly. That night we did order pizza and put on a movie. But now it wasn't the romantic comedy that was playing in my head, but the scene in which we finally said no and stayed true to ourselves. After the door slammed behind her, I felt lighter for the first time in a long time. Artyom sat down next to me, hugged me, and quietly said, "We did the right thing." I nodded. Yes. It was unpleasant that the conversation with his mother ended on such a note. But inside, I knew it couldn't be any other way. If we had given in, this amount for moral support would have been only the beginning. We ordered pizza, turned on a movie. But my thoughts still returned to what had happened. I remembered her look on the threshold. Cold, hurt, and quiet. "You will regret it." It sounded like a promise, but not one you want to hear. I understood that now she would really keep her distance, would not bring a jar of cucumbers, would not call with useful advice, would not offer to help. And, perhaps, it was even for the best. There would finally be silence in our house without hidden signs and hints. Artem poured us a glass of wine and said, "We had to put an end to this." "We did," I answered, feeling the tension gradually fading. "And let this evening be remembered, not for the movie and dinner, but for the fact that we were able to defend our right to live without someone else's fictitious debts." It was a small victory, but a very important one for us. In the evening, when the door closed behind her, I felt the long-awaited relief. Artyom hugged me, and for the first time in a long time we were able to exhale. Now the boundaries are set. No debts. For moral support or advice, we calmly sat down to dinner, ordered pizza, and turned on a movie, realizing that our life is only ours, and other people's claims no longer have power over us. Story 4. When I married Andrei, it seemed to me that I had finally found the very caring, responsible, honest man. We had a beautiful story of how we met. Walks in the rain, night conversations and promises to build a future together. He knew how to speak beautifully, to convince, to be gentle and persuasive, especially when it came to home. Can you imagine? We wake up in our house. You smell fresh coffee on the veranda. And I fry serniki, he said, hugging my shoulders. I laughed and believed. We started discussing real construction. I had an apartment that I inherited from my parents. I held on to it for a long time, even when we were already living together. But Andrei said if we sell it, we will have a great start. I will cover the rest gradually. I will take on the organization of the construction. One word leads to another. And here I am formalizing the deal. Selling my 2-room apartment. I have a decent amount left on hand. I added my savings to it. And we started. Andrei found a plot for construction through friends. The price was tempting, and he assured me that it was almost a gift. I believed him. He insisted that the land and the house itself be registered in his name. It's easier this way. While you're busy at work, I'll register everything. I had no doubts. After all, we're going to live together. Why suspect the man we love? Construction began. I was enthusiastically choosing tiles and doors. Andrei consulted me less and less, but he attributed it to being busy. He assured me that everything was under control. Sometimes I would come to the construction site alone. It seemed to me that he was hiding the progress. The walls were growing. The roof appeared. But each time I found out about something after the fact. When I asked, "Why did you order windows without me?" he waved me off. "Oh, what are you saying? They are standard. You would have chosen them anyway." With each month, I invested more and more. Sometimes for materials, sometimes for workers, sometimes for furniture. I dreamed about how we would celebrate a housewarming, how we would invite friends, how I would arrange flowers on the windowsills. But oddities began to appear. He was often late, began to leave for the construction site alone more often. He explained this by control. I don't want us to be deceived. Sometimes messages from Tolya would flash in his phone. But I didn't ask. I trusted him. One weekend, I decided to go to the construction site alone. Andre said he had an important meeting. I took a thermos of coffee. Wanted to spend a day in the fresh air. Admire the finishing work. When I drove up to the house, my heart sank. Children were playing in the yard. One boy was running with a sword. A girl was pushing a doll on a scooter. And a woman was standing at the porch, talking to the workers, as if she was the owner. I came up to him and introduced myself. "Hello. I am Andre's wife. We are building a house here." The woman was surprised, but not taken aback. "Oh. And I am Olia. Andre and I have children." He said that we would soon be moving. My legs gave way. It was as if I had fallen into a cold hole. I didn't even immediately understand what she had said. How they would move where? "Excuse me. What do you mean?" "Well, the house is almost ready. It's for us. The kids are happy. We've been waiting for this for so long." I didn't answer. Got into the car and drove away. Even forgetting about coffee, my head was buzzing. I couldn't believe what I heard. I came home. Walked around the apartment as if in a fog. I called Andre. He didn't answer. I wrote, "I need to talk to you, urgently." There was no answer. In the evening, he returned, as if nothing had happened. Kissed me on the cheek. Went to wash his hands. I looked at him and did not understand how he could calmly look me in the eyes after that. "Were you at the construction site today?" I asked. He froze. "Yeah. A little." "What was there?" "The woman said that this was a house for her and your children." He sighed. Rubbed his face with his palms. "Look. It's all complicated." "Not now." "No. Right now." "Andre. Or did you think I'd never find out?" He sat down on the sofa and, without looking at me, said, "She's in a difficult situation. Rented housing is expensive. Children. I just decided to help." I kept quiet for a while. It continued, as if justifying himself. "You said yourself that we can build another, better one. We will succeed. The main thing is not money, but relationships." I looked at it, and all the transfers. Checks. My every one of them popped up before my eyes. Let's buy this. Every moment when I chose the tiles, the wallpaper, the sofa. I did all this thinking that they were creating a home for us. And now he was saying that we could build another one. Something inside me broke. I stood up, went to the bedroom, and took the phone. All of this had to be recorded. I entered the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed. The phone in my hand was shaking, as if it sensed my tension. I turned on the camera and turned it towards me. "My name is Lena. I am Andre's wife. We built a house together. I put everything into it, my money, time, energy. And now he's going to move his ex-wife and children in there." My voice was shaking. There was a lump in my throat. I pressed stop and immediately forwarded the video to my friend. "Marina. A lavier." A couple of minutes later, she sent me a short reply. "Urgently collect all the transfers. Checks. Receipts. Everything related to the house. The house is registered to Nega. We'll dispute this." I left the room. Andre was standing in the kitchen, pouring himself some tea, acting as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't broken my trust and betrayed me in the most vile way. "Are we going to talk, or are you going to keep quiet again?" I asked coldly. He turned around and smiled crookedly. "Len, don't be dramatic. It's not like you think." "How, tell me? How do you think I should react when I find your ex-wife and kids in the house I built with my money? Who is sure she's moving there?" He sighed heavily and sat down on a stool. "Look. Yes. He made a mistake. But you know, she's going through a tough time. She asked for a little help. I just thought, well, let them live for a while until they get on their feet. Let them live in my house for a while." I lost it. "Are you out of your mind? We planned this house together. I invested over $2 million in it. Andri. And you didn't even think it necessary to ask me, before inviting other people there. The house is registered in my name. In case you forgot? He said, and immediately realized that he had said too much. So you thought about it in advance, yes. I had it all figured out. Use my money, and register it in your name. Convenient. Only now, everything will be different. I took out my phone again. What are you doing? He asked. Frightened. I'm filming you admitting to fraud. He lunged at me. Tried to snatch the phone. But I managed to press it to myself. Do you think I don't have copies? Everything you said has already been heard by others. You're a traitor. Andri. He froze. Then walked away. And began to pace around the kitchen like an animal in a cage. Lena. Let's not. Why do we need a war? It's just... Well, a little complicated. Complex. This is betrayal. Not a complicated situation. I screamed. You lived with me. Ate my bread. Used my money. Promised a family. A home. And now you just decided to write me out of the equation. He fell onto the couch and covered his face with his hands. I looked at him and couldn't believe that this was the same man I trusted. I'm filing my lawsuit, I said calmly. And don't expect it to go unnoticed. I will make sure that this house never becomes yours. He tried to feign remorse. Lena. Let's sit down and discuss everything. I didn't want to offend you. I just didn't think that it would go this far. You didn't think. And when you registered the house in your name, you didn't think either. When you lied to me about the expenses, you didn't think. And when you took your ex there, you didn't think. I looked straight into your eyes. You understood everything perfectly. You just thought that I would swallow it all. He fell silent. I went to pack my things. Every movement was like a challenge. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't break furniture. Like they do in the movies. I just put my things in a suitcase. Behind me. There was a feeling as if a part of my life had been torn out of me. Thrown out and trampled. Andre stood in the doorway and watched. You don't have to react like that, he said. And you didn't have to be like that under your face, I replied, zipping up my jacket. On the way out, I looked at him one last time. Remember, Andri, a house isn't built of brick and plaster. A house is a house of trust. And you destroyed it to the ground. I slammed the door. There was emptiness and anger inside. But freedom began beyond the threshold. I left the apartment, got into a taxi, and went to Marina. We had known each other since university. But in recent years we had become almost like sisters. She opened the door as soon as I went up to the floor and immediately pulled me into the kitchen. I saw everything, she said, pouring me tea. It went deep. I nodded silently. I was shaking not from fear, but from anger. I felt everything boiling inside. Like betrayal was eating me away from the inside. Marina took out a notepad, opened her laptop and started writing. So, first things first. Receipts. Transfers. Checks. Do you have everything saved? Yes. I have a separate folder on my phone and in the cloud. I even have paper copies. I saved everything. You never know. Well, it came in handy. As she nodded. How much did you invest in total? Almost 5 million. Selling the apartment. Savings. A little credit money. Everything there. And the house is fully registered in his name. The land. The house. Everything. He said it was easier that way. I stupidly believed it. Marina thought about it. So, we'll fight through the court. Demand compensation. We will prove that the house was built with your funds. Despite the registration, this is property enrichment at the expense of a third party. Plus moral damage. He knew that you were paying and deliberately registered everything in his name. We will have a strong position. That evening I stayed with her. We sorted through papers. Statements. Screenshots of correspondence until the night. The more I dug into the details, the clearer the picture became. He planned everything calmly, coolly, step by step. First, he suggested a construction site. Then he registered everything in his name for convenience. And then he started taking his ex there. The next day, we went to the bank and closed the joint account. Some money was still left in it. I insisted on freezing until clarification. Then she went to the tax office and to the notary to record that my funds were used for construction. Marina filed a statement and prepared a claim. That same evening, Andre called. I picked up the phone. Then he started writing Lena. Why are you ruining everything? It was a temporary measure. I wanted to discuss everything with you later. You know I didn't mean any harm. I just forwarded all his messages to Marina. She just snorted. Typical reaction. First, he manipulates. Then he makes excuses. Then he accuses. Hold on. A few days later, we filed documents with the court. Andre found out about it and called Marina. She turned on the speakerphone. Are you seriously considering taking this to court? He began irritably. We are adults. Why the scandal? Adults do not use their wives as sponsors for their exes. Marina answered coldly. You acted like a fraud. Lena has every right to compensation. Let her take the money. I will give it back. Why these formalities? Because you started with deception. And you will have to answer for it according to the law. He tried to argue. Threaten. Then beg. It all sounded pathetic. His confidence crumbled when he realized that I was not going to make peace. A week later, a notice arrived. The court accepted the claim. I went to the site again. I wanted to see the house. Standing in front of the gate, I felt something inside me letting go. I looked at the walls, the roof, the windows, and felt no pain. This house was no longer mine. I burned out of my heart, everything that connected me to it. That same Olya came out from inside the house. Saw me and froze. I simply nodded. You probably think that he loves you, I said quietly. But if a man can betray one woman like that, he will definitely betray the second. She lowered her eyes. Did not say a word. Only stood and looked after me when I turned and left. Later, I was told that she had moved out. Apparently, she felt that the smell of burning betrayal had reached her too. Andre was left alone. With a trial. And debts. And a ruined reputation. And I, having gone through this hell, began to build another life. Without him. Without illusions. From scratch. But now not for someone else, but for myself. The trial did not last long. Only 3 hearings. I didn't miss a single one. I sat in the courtroom, looked straight at Andre, and held my head high. He came to the first session in an expensive suit, confident, with a grin on his face, as if he thought this was all just a temporary misunderstanding. But the further the case went, the less of that grin became. Marina spoke clearly, confidently, presented all the evidence. Transfers, bank statements, correspondence, receipts for materials and furniture, audio recordings where he admits that the house was built with my money. Andre's lawyer tried to challenge this, saying that the money was transferred voluntarily, without clear conditions. But the judge quickly destroyed this line of defense. If a citizen invested almost 5 million rubles in construction, and the property is not registered in her name, there is a reasonable suspicion of abuse of trust, the judge said. At the last hearing, when it became clear that the decision would not be in his favor, Andre tried to play his last card. He stood up and began to speak. Your Honor, I did not want to cause harm. I just had circumstances. My ex-wife and children were left homeless. I acted humanely. And Elena. She just didn't understand. The judge interrupted him. You could have shown humane behavior if you had settled property issues with your legal spouse beforehand. And not after. I sat. Listened. And there was a strange emptiness inside. No anger. No pain. Just a sense of closure. As if I had finally closed the lid of a suitcase I had been dragging around for too long. The court's decision was clear. to acknowledge the fact that I had invested my personal funds in the construction of the house and to oblige Andre to pay me compensation in full, including moral damages, and to freeze his property until the debt was fully repaid. Andre tried to appeal the decision, but the court refused. It was all too obvious. He found himself at a dead end. The house he wanted to give away. The ex was under arrest. And the ex, as my friends later told me, quickly packed up the kids and moved out. As soon as I found out that the situation was unfavorable, I moved into a rented apartment. Small but cozy, with large windows and the smell of fresh paint. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free to think. Free to choose. Free to wake up without fear. One evening, a couple of weeks after the trial, I received a message from Andre. I realized everything. I want to talk. Maybe we can start over. I looked at the screen and just laughed. Really? Bitterly. Loudly. With relief. I remembered everything, every stone bought for the construction site. Every night spent in thought. Every time I believed him. And I realized there is nowhere to go back. I am no longer the woman who can be deceived by beautiful words. I did not answer. I simply deleted his number, and for the first time I felt that I did everything right. Not because I took revenge, but because I chose myself. My dignity. My principles and my life without those who betray.